Hello everybody, I'm George from Ireland. Here I'm at the Company Gardens in Cape Town, and behind me you see the saffron pear tree. And now it's thought that Jan van Riebeeck, when he came out from the Netherlands in 1752, transplanted this here, making the oldest tree in the garden. It's been struck by lightning but survived, had surgery in 1980, and the arborists have helped it survive to this day. So a fruit-bearing tree, astonishing longevity. I know that those giant redwoods and giant sequoias in the United States can last thousands of years. Now, this is called Company Gardens in honor of the Verenigde Oost-Indische Company, the United East India Company, literally, as in that's the Dutch East India Company. Now, notwithstanding its dissolution in 1799, this garden still bears that name, Company Gardens. Anyway, so the Dutch East India Company set up their colony at the Cape to resupply ships sailing on to what's today Indonesia. But they had trading posts in what's now India. They ruled Sri Lanka for a time, then called Ceylon. They traded with the Japanese, for instance. They had some ports on the coast of what's now Malaysia and so forth. So they needed to reprovision the ships with not just drinking water, but fruits. I think scurvy wasn't understood in those days. It was only in the late 18th century the Royal Navy insisted that their sailors drink lime juice to ward off that. Anyway, here's a statue of Cecil John Rhodes, who's worthy of another video in his own right, but I shall deal with that a bit later. Anyway, so on we go, and there are streams which come straight down from Table Mountain, which water this garden, so they were known as canals. Anyway, you can see it's an idyllic and indeed aromatic garden, so very popular for leisure and recreation in the middle of Cape Town. Of course, in the apartheid era, which only fully ended in 1990, non-white people weren't allowed in. Now, they did somewhat relax in the late 1980s. So apartheid meaning apartness in the Afrikaans language, as in to keep the two races, well, all the races separated except for work. But, you know, black people kept in the servient position, and the white minority hogging the natural resources for themselves. So this avarice obviously caused terrible resentment with the black community largely in penury. It was almost impossible to escape that, being offered very little education, very underfunded. So that's it, that whites would be sort of guaranteed all sorts of jobs, even the poorest, least educated jobs, where there was pauperism amongst the black community, and they'd be forced to work for whites. Passed laws, they couldn't travel freely around their own country, they couldn't come to pleasant places like this, to nice sandy beaches, a stony beach miles out of town without any facilities, if anything at all. So obviously the black community did not like being second-class citizens in their own country. They couldn't get South African citizenship, whereas a white immigrant could get it after a few years. So why on earth could someone born in South Africa, whose family had been here for millennia, why was he or she not eligible for citizenship on the grounds of skin colour? So it was flagrantly unjust, and obviously this caused embitterment and enormous resistance, and eventually even the apartheid government, the National Party, realised the situation was unsustainable. So that's why it's completely phased out in 1994, and there they have racial equality, which is definitely a good thing. But anyway, you can see all these various roses, and there are some plants which are indigenous to South Africa, some which were brought in from Europe in particular, and so it's kept in very good nick. I mean, that's one of the things that really impressed me about South Africa, is the way things are in good condition, the way it's so clean. It compares favourably with many European countries, notably Romania, and there are no stray dogs or anything like that. There's almost no graffiti, there's very little litter around, so it's a horticulturist delight. There's the botanical gardens, which I haven't visited thus far. So what else about the Company Gardens? Obviously, it's no longer cultivating comestibles. That is long over. And then after the French Revolution, France formed an alliance with the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom went to war against them, and the British, they were able to seize the Cape Colony. Of course, the original Dutch settlers had started calling themselves Afrikaners, as in Africans, and largely running their own show, because they're so far away from the Netherlands. It's a voyage of at least 2 months to get here. So it's a bit like the situation that prefigured the American Revolution. Ooh, look, the tablecloth is lifted. We can see the majestic peaks of Table Mountain rising high above us, well over 1,000 meters. Anyway, so they had a degree of autonomy, but anyway, they're conquered by the United Kingdom. And when the Napoleonic Wars finally ended in 1814, the Netherlands, they recognise this as being under British suzerainty. But obviously the autochthonous people of the region, the Xhosa people, the Khoekhoe and the San and so forth, they weren't asked what they wanted. The notion of national self-determination didn't arrive. There were white supremacist assumptions in much of the white world at the time. And the Dutch, they had brought people they called Malays, what's now Malaysia, Indonesia here, or indeed people from Madagascar, Mozambique, Angola, people they'd simply abducted or indeed purchased human beings as though they were mere chattel, and they'd intermarried. Because when Van Riebeeck came off the boat, there were only 8 Dutch women with him and 82 Dutchmen. So that would mean 74 Dutchmen left over. And assuming that not that many of them were gay, which would have been illegal at the time, what were they going to do for female company? So they had children with indigenous women, and then the mixed race community, or the colour community as they're known, was born. So it's ironic that later on, under apartheid, the Immorality Act was passed, which criminalised sexual relations between different races and indeed interracial marriage. But their founding fathers, as they saw it, Van Riebeeck and his crew, some of them had intermarried, or at least had intimate relations with women of the native peoples of this country. Anyway, but somehow they weren't regarded as criminals by the by the apartheid regime. So I'm very glad it's gone, because it was a deprivation of people's rights. It's preposterous to be so categorical and think that someone's skin colour determines his or her character, abilities and disabilities and stuff like that, or that any reason that we should be separated. And if whites really believed that, why on earth would they come to this continent and to this country where black people were always the majority? So it would be depriving me of my right to marry some of another race or things like that. So that's why apartheid is gone, dead and buried, with quicklime poured on top, never ever to return, and virtually never heard of anyone who'd even want it back. I mean, despite the imperfections and disappointments of democracy since, it's still at least 10 times better than what went before. Really, everybody is better off. The problem is the improvement in people's lives has not been as big as it should have been. Yeah, so Company Gardens, you're getting an idea of what a glorious green sward it's got, and delightful palm trees right in the heart of the city. And so there are offices around. So it's a fairly tranquil city. It's not too noisy. The air quality is high. So there's no choking smog or pollution or things like that. So it's very go ahead with the green spaces, with green policies, and it's probably the gay capital of the continent. So same-sex marriage has been recognised for over 10 years here now. It's not to say there's no homophobia. There's some of that from the Christian fundamentalist community to this day. Well, anyway, thank you so much for watching my video. So if you come to Cape Town, I'd warmly recommend that you take a moment's repose in this delightful garden. And yes, you are allowed to walk on the grass, but I don't see... Some people indeed are dozing there. Being a Saturday afternoon, that might explicate why so many people are just taking a break here, and tell you all about these plants. But you know, I'm no botanist. I can't tell one from another. I don't know anything about trees. Right, thank you very much for watching my channel, and toodaloo.